Hi, I'm your Gemini friend. So I'm making a video about the moon, which I know, this is not at all a difficult topic to find information on, but I thought that I might have sort of a unique perspective as I'm a Capricorn moon, which is the worst moon sign. It's the moon sign in detriment, opposite its natural sign, Cancer. So what I'm gonna do is I am gonna go over the moon, what it represents in our chart, and my experience with understanding it as somebody who has had to come to learn how to actually use the moon. Capricorn moons tend to prioritize everything but the most natural expression of the moon. So after I go over that, I'm going to go through each sign and give some sort of unlikely advice or something that I think is gonna go against what the typical moon advice would be. Since I'm probably not going to do a series on moon signs, I have done moon in the houses, but if a lot of people want a moon in the sign series, that's cool. But I was thinking next that I was going to do Saturn through the houses. So let me know anything that you'd be particularly interested in. I kind of just go off of inspiration and what seems like the most interesting thing in the moment. But before I get into this, just want to mention I do offer personal natal chart readings and synastry readings, and I'm figuring out different other sorts of readings that I want to offer, but that's really it. So let's get into this. I actually want to start talking about the moon by contrasting it with the sun, since our sun and our moon are going to be the biggest parts of who we are as people. The sun is our external expression. It's our external self, and the sun tends to represent an area of confidence and pride that we have naturally, like something that we naturally resonate with, that energy of our sun sign. But the moon, it's just as important, just as personal, but it's more private. It's something that's more internalized and something that more the people that we're more comfortable with see, or maybe even nobody truly sees it. Of course, it's going to show out sometimes in our emotional expression, but it's our inner world. It's so private and so much who we are without the sort of filters that we have when we're interacting with other people. But there's a real solitariness to the moon, because these are parts that we don't necessarily have validated by other people. They might not be seen, all of that. But sometimes you can feel more like your moon sign than your sun sign. So the first thing that I want to talk about with the moon is that this is essentially our inner voice, our inner critic sometimes. It's how we treat ourselves, the emotional environment that we create for ourselves internally, and sometimes it's not even our voice. Since the moon is so deeply related to family, childhood, growing up in the way that we were nurtured and taught to process our feelings, even if that's not directly being taught, but more what we saw and the ways that we begin to behave just based off of what we saw modeled for us. Our moon can absolutely represent, say, like our parents' voice or even our parents' opinion. We can process things that are deeply personal through somebody else or through our impression of them, our version of what they would be. So the moon can get really kind of messy in this way, but that doesn't mean that it's not you. It's just that sometimes we need to filter through those parts of us that aren't us and find the best expression that is going to work for us. Because of course the moon is related to the mother, the more maternal parent, or however it was that you received nurture as a child. And depending on your moon sign, that's going to tell you that sort of style of nurture and whether you got it at all. But it's not necessarily straightforward. There can be many layers to it, and we don't just interact with our parents growing up. This is all sorts of guardians, grandparents, or teachers, people that we interacted with at a formative age, and basically the way that they informed us to feel, to treat our feelings, and to express our feelings. So another thing that the moon represents is our comfort. This is like where we're comfortable, our sense of home, our sense of nurture, rest, and family, the relationship that you have with your family or the idea of family, and just with security and safety, especially emotionally. But emotional security is different for each moon sign. What you need in order to feel safe is also going to differ based off of your moon sign. And while our sun is showing a more external sense of confidence and pride, the moon, if we don't have those things that make us feel internally confident and safe within ourselves, disregarding our actual home, our actual surrounding areas, even though that's important too, obviously, our internal feeling of like being okay, feeling safe with who we are as a person is so important, because this is the internal home that we build for ourselves. So it's super important that you check the vibe of your internal home. Is it a place that you'd want to live? Is this a place that you find actually builds you up, makes you feel better, or do you have a critical voice that's always telling you what you've done wrong, bringing yourself down? Because even with my moon in detriment, I've learned how to take that extreme focus on productivity, efficiency, and just blocking off all emotions, and I figured out how to make that productive in a way that's not cruel to myself. All of this is to say, self-care needs to be something that really works for you, and it's going to be different for each moon sign. And of course, the house that your moon is in is just as important, because this is going to be the area of life where this plays out, and it's also the sort of area of life that we use for comfort. So if we have a complicated or difficult relationship with this house, and the house that your moon is in, there is likely a major focus on this area, especially in childhood. This could have been an area of life that you were really taught to focus on, or somehow made to prioritize that particular area, that topic, that, you know, all the houses are different, but to have a really healthy relationship with that area of life is going to help with internal comfort, internal confidence, and creating a feeling of safety within yourself. And with the moon being our emotional processing, the moon is inherently emotional. It doesn't matter what sign it's in, even if you're in, like, say, the most detached air sign like Aquarius, where you're really intellectualizing things. Every person has emotions, we have feelings, and there's a strong importance to those feelings. We do have to process these feelings, or they stay stuck in us. We can't just deny it and ignore and push things off forever, or it stays trapped inside, and that actually manifests in different sorts of issues, internal and external. But if you have a less emotional placement, it can be hard to even recognize that you do need to go there sometimes. And the thing that I have had to learn the most about emotions is that Gemini Sun, Capricorn Moon, okay, I will logic and intellectualize everything, and then I will only feel what seems necessary or like it's productive. But just understanding something, just knowing it, is not always enough. We can still struggle with something that we totally get. We know exactly what caused it. We know exactly the ways that it's playing out in our life and what we could do to fix it. But if we are only taking those practical things and we're not actually processing the emotion, we're not feeling the initial sadness that was like the start of this, we're not recognizing, you know, whatever it could be, if we don't process that emotion, we're never going to fully get the lesson. You can't just think your way into emotional healing. It's just not going to work. But I don't even want to say how long it took me to figure this out. And those of you with more naturally emotional moons, like, yes, this might sound simple, and that's a wonderful thing if you truly understand just the necessity of processing your feelings, of feeling them, letting them flow, getting rid of it, emotionally connecting to that issue so that we can integrate it into who we are as a person, or sometimes we just truly just need to feel it. But the goal here is to expose yourself to what you're afraid of feeling, to what you're avoiding feeling, to the things that upset you. If there's something that lingers, if it's something that might pop up every once in a while, that doesn't mean that you have gotten rid of it when it's gone. It's just a temporary fix. And while I understand managing emotions, emotions aren't really meant to be managed, they're meant to be felt. So looking at the sign that our moon is in, this is essentially the personality of our moon. And through that sign's natural expression, that's how we would process these emotions. So you can just personify your moon sign, like think of them as a person that would react to certain things in certain ways, and that tends to be like the ideal expression for you. But you have to imagine the sign as a healthy person with a healthy expression, and that's the tricky part, because some signs wouldn't handle it in a way that would be healthy. It's also super important to recognize your own specific way of doing it. Like, just because I'm saying that feeling the feeling is the important thing, it doesn't mean that you have to do it publicly, it doesn't mean you have to do it with other people. You can do it in your own way, in the way that feels the best for you, feels the most natural. And if emotional expression does not feel natural, it still doesn't mean you don't need to express it. I mean, if you have a more emotionally avoidant personality or moon sign, it can be helpful to specifically allot time to connecting with your body, scanning your body for feelings and see if any memories arise, if any weird feelings come up. There are all sorts of things that we can store in our bodies, and just taking the time to recognize it does us so much good. But for people who are more oriented towards productivity, this doesn't sound like a productive activity. And the world really encourages us to be productive in a way that is externally validated. But the internal validation that you get from actually going there when you have needed to go there for years, it changes everything on the outside. Because when we get rid of an emotional problem or find a way to make it work for us, then everything that has ever been connected to that emotional problem disappears. Or we know how to handle it. And when we don't have this initial pain just quietly tugging at us, then it makes encountering that pain in a different circumstance so much more tolerable because you've processed it. It's not there anymore. You know you can handle it. That's the thing, is that sometimes we avoid emotions because we feel like we can't handle it. It feels like it's too much, or like it's going to be too much, so we push it off. I mean, I have a million different tactics of distancing myself from emotions, finding the most impersonal ways to process them, and that can work. But there's really nothing like sitting in that feeling of a memory or even just an unrecognizable feeling and allowing it, asking it what it means, what that part of you wants, just acknowledging it sometimes. This is how we heal things within us. And the healing is important because, like I said before, everything in your life kind of aligns better when you've gotten rid of this pain, because you're no longer looking for ways to deal with it subconsciously. Because even if mentally we are completely over it, above it, we don't want to go there, our subconscious feels some distress and it will actively seek out situations that prompt that feeling back out of us in some other way. It's like if we have some specific pain, we're going to keep encountering things that give us that specific pain again until we react to it emotionally. So I'm not saying you have to become someone who is totally comfortable with crying, but I am saying that you can't go your whole life without crying and still be living in like your healthy best self. I know crying is weird. It's so weird. It's really weird and it's embarrassing. But that's coming from a Capricorn moon. If you are comfortable with crying, and that's the most beautiful thing, and it's incredible. I know this is, it's coming from kind of a weird perspective. But anyway, what I believe about the moon is that the moon is essentially our internal response to the environment that we grew up in. We picked the best sign and the best house in order to adapt, to protect ourselves, to connect with the important people in our lives, to form connections. Our moon sign is only going to make sense with how we were raised. And while we can't change this, we can absolutely create the healthiest expression for ourselves. So going into a little bit of unlikely advice for each moon sign. The thing with an Aries moon is that Aries, it's a fighter, it's a warrior, okay? So this energy can actively seek out things to fight, and sometimes it can be your feelings. If you're feeling a feeling and instead of taking that and like making something of it, you're trying to calm down, trying to be patient, trying to take advice that really isn't great for Aries energy, at least as far as its natural expression. A better way of trying to manage these feelings is to channel them into something, to burn it like fuel. The worst thing that Aries, the most impulsive sign, can do is overanalysis and separation from that emotion. Sitting with it might just feel wrong. You might want to turn it into action. For example, like if you're mad about something, use that energy to do something that you needed to do anyway. Because this can kind of be turned into like a weird little superpower if you use your reactions as fuel for things. You can find that you actually have a lot of fuel for the things that might be harder to do or harder to make yourself do. Okay, and then for the Taurus moon, Taurus moons love being comfortable, being stable, things that feel secure and familiar. And even if everything else in your chart indicates otherwise, your emotions are tightly tied to this concept. But the only thing that we can count on is that things are going to change. So if you find that your comfort is really linked to things that are stable or predictable, or stuff that you know what to expect with. Of course, when you're able to get into a comfortable situation to soothe yourself, that's absolutely fine, but it can actually be really helpful to create comfortability, stability, and familiarity within yourself, or with something that's more portable, something you can take with yourself, so that you can still feel that sense of security, but within just changing circumstances. To really focus on creating that comfort within yourself, then you're always able to bring it with you. This can even be techniques for really grounding your energy, or something that you hold on to that just feels right in your hand, that sort of thing. Instead of resisting change, finding a way to make change work for you, I think, can be really helpful. And then Gemini moon. So one thing with Gemini moons is that it could sound from descriptions like your emotions are shallow. You could even have a relationship with your emotions where you feel like you're not quite willing or able or desiring to go particularly deep into things. You might prefer a more surface level relationship with your emotions, but this isn't a bad thing. You don't have to make yourself super uncomfortable. You just have to find your own way to process your emotions. And with Gemini, it's so useful to do it by talking or writing or putting it into words and information that you can really make sense of. Because typical things like meditation can be super, super hard for Gemini moons. You might need to find a different way to go about that sort of internal exploration. It can feel boring, it can feel like it's just too much at the moment. But you don't have to be still. You don't have to be quiet in the dark. It is important to be alone for a lot of things, because especially with Gemini energy, it can really adapt to other people when they're around. So that focused aloneness, I do think, is important, but you absolutely don't have to follow the normal ways that people might tell you to connect to your emotions or lie there quietly still with your eyes closed. If that causes your mind to wander, you might need to be doing something with your hands. You might find that meditation comes from having the front of your mind focused on something while the back can work through something else. Or this can be really helpful to expose yourself to those things that do make you uncomfortable. Because it is important that you have depth in you, you're a person. And if you prefer to skim over that, it can be helpful to seek out those things that make you uncomfortable, not in a bad way, but it makes you feel a little too much, that sort of thing. Like, say, a movie topic that you're like, oh, I don't want to go there, or a song that you just always skip because you start to feel something at the beginning. That sort of thing can be really helpful for Gemini to go there, and then you can analyze it, you can process it, you can think about it, but you don't have to force that stillness, because that can really make your mind run wild and not be particularly helpful. And then for Cancer moon. So Cancer is the most natural sign for the moon to be in. It's a very healthy emotional expression typically. But one thing that Cancer can really struggle with is feeling like you need to be too nurturing for other people, and feeling like it's selfish to nurture yourself. Because it could be really, really easy for you to care for the people around you, to give them what they need emotionally. But if you are not giving that to yourself as well, if you're not recognizing that you need it too, and you're not asking for it because you feel like you always need to be giving it, that's how you build resentment. That's how you create situations where it will spill over the top eventually, even if you can push it off. It is never going to be selfish to take care of yourself when you need it, because you're super in tune with your emotions. But being super in tune with other people's emotions too can kind of mix things up sometimes, where you could feel like you always need to be there for other people, for, say, being like a shoulder to cry on. You're always available. But if you're not getting that from the people that you need it from, it can be important to set emotional boundaries and to not lean too hard into that nurturer, caregiver sort of persona, and give that to you first. Because if you're taking care of yourself first, that only makes your nurturing stronger. It gives you a firmer foundation to go about taking care of people in the way that you might want to. So being a little more selective about the people and the situations that you take care of, if it doesn't feel right in the moment, you don't have to do anything that you're not comfortable with. though I realize that it can also be uncomfortable to refuse things like that. But this just tends to be such a naturally giving sign because of that attunement to emotions overall, more than just your own. But focus on your own, focus on what you need to, because those people who truly love you, they're always going to be there, and they want you to be at your best. And then Leo moon. So the thing with the Leo moon is that this comes with a natural sense of pride, confidence, and usually a very strong connection to the emotions. But this can also come with the feeling of needing to be something for everybody. And the moon is about comfort. It's about feeling safe within ourselves. And the best way to always feel safe within yourself is to confidently be yourself in a way that you don't have to perform for other people. You don't have to be a certain thing around a certain person. Truly being the authentic version of yourself always at every point, rather than feeling like you need to meet specific expectations from people because, like, say they're looking up to you, they find you a source of inspiration, but you don't even want to bother impressing or inspiring people who aren't actually going to resonate with your true essence. You want to be yourself so that you find those people who truly appreciate you for who you are, because that's going to feel absolutely the best. And you also don't have to be at your best. You don't have to be the best version of yourself constantly. You could feel this strong pressure to always be like perfectly put together or exactly the way that you want to present yourself. And while it's totally going to depend on the person whether or not you actually do feel comfortable within your true essence or not, it could be a kind of interesting experiment to try just existing without any of the extra things that you do or that you feel like you need to do. Because to be accepted even without all of those, it feels even better. And that's security. The idea that no matter what, at any point, you will still love yourself exactly the way you are. And then all of the people around you essentially being curated through your authenticity. The people who can't handle it, they will fall away. The people who love it, they will be drawn to you. And then, I mean, you're always good. But it's about truly being who you are rather than what you feel like is going to be best for the moment. And then Virgo moons. This is the most familiar moon sign other than my own with this sort of like usefulness focus when it comes to your emotions. Like if a feeling isn't useful, if it's not practical, you might go into that really Virgo, I need to fix it. Sometimes you can just feel bad and let that be without the need to like turn it into something that is going to be serving a purpose. Emotions, they don't necessarily serve a purpose. Or they don't have to. They don't need to fit into any sort of structure. They don't need to be organized. Sometimes they are messy, and they can be allowed to be messy. Nothing wrong with you if you have messy emotions. Nothing wrong with you if you can't figure out why you feel a certain way or exactly what to do about it in the moment. I think that acceptance of yourself in that moment with that emotion is actually more powerful than really working on it like it's a problem to solve. And you can even take your familiarity with creating routines and structure and find a structured way to handle these messier things, like putting time aside to just feel, just see what comes up without really trying to like understand it and fit it into a specific box or category. Just because you might feel bad doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. Everybody feels bad. Everybody has negative emotions, and sometimes people have unexpected reactions to things. We can't always understand exactly where a reaction comes from, and even if understanding can be security because then you know what to do about it, sometimes accepting things the way they are can ease that sense of I need to do something about it. And sometimes that being linked to the negative emotion can make it so much worse. So without complicating it, you might be able to just process it as it is without trying to figure out why or what to do with it. So okay, Libra moon. Libra moons tend to prioritize harmony, fairness, equality, all of that, which are all great things. But not everything is going to be fair. It sucks, but I mean, life isn't fair. And sometimes you need to take something for yourself rather than putting somebody else ahead of you. Or like making a sacrifice for them for the sake of compromise, for the sake of harmony. This is the moon sign that really needs to be told, take up space, take up more space, really own your space and assert yourself. Sometimes you're gonna have situations where you're gonna have to make a decision, and it's not gonna be to everybody's best interest. So creating comfort within yourself, recognizing just how much beauty and harmony you bring to the table, to every situation, that's enough. You don't necessarily have to make things better or pay attention to how everybody in a situation feels. Of course, it's kind to, it's likely very natural for you, but not everybody is going to have your best interest at heart, and not everybody is going to appreciate that fairness that you bring and the effort that you put in. And this is something that can really build resentment over time. If you feel like, okay, I am always sacrificing a part of myself for the sake of everything around me and everybody else, because if you let that build, it'll ruin all of your relationships. So really focusing on honesty. Libra is not in its natural energy when it's lying for the sake of peace. That's not what Libra is about. It can feel like it sometimes, and this energy can absolutely be mistranslated in that way. But Libra stands for equality and fairness above all else, above the comfort of the people who were wrong, above the idea of maybe this will hurt someone's feelings. But it's honest, it's your truth, and you can trust yourself to be somebody who enforces fairness. So be fair to yourself, and don't make yourself uncomfortable with people that aren't even like really appreciating you. Okay, and then Scorpio moon. So the thing with the Scorpio moon, I mean, Scorpio, it's an intense sign, and it tends to be drawn towards intense situations. There's a natural draw to depth and things that might be hard to look at, hard for other people to look at, and this constant desire for, like, I need to go deeper, I need to be suffering because it's familiar. This craving for depth. Not all emotions necessarily have to be deep. You can create peace for yourself, because you know better than anybody that there will always be disruptions to the peace. But when the peace is there, embrace it. Peace can be transformative too. If you're somebody who has always been familiar with chaos and disruptions and things being difficult, this can really lead to creating even more of it, because that's what feels comfortable. Turbulence as comfort, because that's what you're used to. But sometimes things are still, sometimes things are maybe uneventful, maybe even boring. I would say really lean into those boring times and find a way to make it enriching. And not in a way that pulls you into something darker or pulls you into some sort of situation that you can like investigate and explore, because this is something you naturally do. You're always going to have chances, but maybe establishing a little bit more like calm, peaceful, tranquility, happiness, even if just for a moment. When that moment comes, take it. Seize the opportunity to really learn who you are in times of peace. Because you're strong and resilient. You're gonna be able to handle anything, but you don't always have to. And then Sagittarius moon. So of course, Sagittarius is about exploration and adventure and expansion, but this can sometimes lead to emotional distancing, because rather than feeling something that you don't want to feel, you can always just look outside of yourself or think about something new, try to create meaning from something. This can even be taking your emotions and trying to create meaning out of them to the point where you've distanced yourself from that actual feeling. You understand it, you get it, you see what it means, you see why it happens, you've gained the wisdom. But if you keep focusing on a problem, it's lingering, it's still there. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Even if you understand it and you know what it's meant for you, if you haven't processed it emotionally, if you haven't really connected to that feeling through feeling, then it will remain there. What you can do, instead of looking outside of yourself, you can treat inside of yourself as something new to explore, something that you can basically have like an internal adventure where you're not escaping the problem, you're actually diving right into it. And I know that it can absolutely seem like you're not escaping a problem, you're thinking about it all the time. My moon is in the 9th house. I get this. And I get so well how we can understand something for years and years and years, and it's still there. It still hasn't completely seemed to be solved. We're still kind of hung up on it. And that's because even if we know the exact origin point of our trauma, if we haven't actually felt what we were supposed to feel in the moment that we might have blocked ourselves from, or maybe feel that indignation for that younger version of us from being mistreated, all the different things that can happen. If we don't feel the feeling, then we're never going to get over it. And then the meaning that you get from it afterwards, I mean, you can help so many people that way. And then Capricorn moon. So this is a big deal with control. Control for Capricorn moons, we think that this keeps us safe. We think that having a structure or even having something that we do that really keeps us from needing to ever face our emotion, that it keeps us away from what feels weak and unnecessary, which is feelings, vulnerability. But what we are not recognizing by avoiding them is that we can handle it. If we avoid something because we feel like we might be out of control, if we suppress it, we push it down, then what we're telling ourselves is, I do not trust myself to be able to handle this. I don't trust myself to be able to make it through this. I don't trust myself to handle the situation properly. But you will. You absolutely will. That's the thing, is that you do know that. You know that your sense of like capability, responsibility, you can handle anything. But by avoiding an emotion like it's something scary, even if you're not going to actually recognize it as scary, maybe it's, something more like, no, that's unnecessary, that's unimportant. But if it pops back up, if you have a recurring issue, it becomes important. Because the thing with Capricorn is that we're so strong, we feel like we can endure anything. But you don't have to endure something. You don't have to endure the suffering of managing a painful emotion for your entire life. You can give that up, you can release it, you can process it, you can get rid of it. And I'm not telling you have to be vulnerable. You don't have to be vulnerable like with another person, you don't have to share. You can keep it all to yourself if you want to, but you are doing yourself a disservice by telling yourself, I don't trust myself to be able to handle it. And I know that what it looks like on the surface is, I'm too strong to cry. I'm not gonna let this actually get to me. This isn't getting to me, but we're people, we have feelings, they get to us. It's a part of being here. And it's stronger to face it and see what comes from it and then recognize afterwards, oh, I handled it. So much stronger than avoiding it. And then Aquarius moon. So this is such an interesting one because there's this crazy balance avoidance sort of thing when it comes to forming connections with people, because this is quite an intellectual, more emotionally distanced moon where you might prefer to understand your feelings rather than to feel them. But the other side of Aquarius is that it thrives in groups and communities and with friends and when you feel like you're a part of something. So while you might think that it's impractical to share these feelings, that's actually sometimes the best way to really get them out and really understand them, by getting someone else's perspective. Because your perspective, of course it's important, it's valid, but like it's only your perspective and you might need somebody else's perspective. Because even if you don't agree with it, it offers something and you naturally understand the importance of what other people have to offer. And I mean, this comes with a really strong, rebellious, independent streak. But to connect with other people in a way that feels more vulnerable, really letting them in, that doesn't mean that you're gonna lose yourself in that. It's not sacrificing any sort of independence that you might have, or your autonomy, or whatever it could be that feels kind of threatening about getting to the more emotional, soft side of things. It's not a trap. It can feel like a trap. It can feel like nobody could possibly understand you, but I promise, everyone, every single Aquarius moon, you at least have like one other Aquarius moon living right now that would understand you, or even another moon sign. We have problems that we don't understand just how relatable they can be to other people. Sometimes we can see our perspective and think, nobody will ever get this. How could anybody understand what I've been through specifically, because it's so weird, or like my feelings about this are super weird. I can't explain it. Just all those things. But to feel understood, that is an absolute gift for an Aquarius moon. So definitely prioritize important, significant connections within your life and don't avoid being emotional with them just based off of like, maybe you want to be seen as a more emotionally distant person, and that's fine. But it can be a trap to yourself if you create a sort of persona for yourself where you can never open up in that way. And like, strength in numbers is really a thing here, just because of the tie to community. And bigger purpose, a greater understanding overall of where you fall within society. It's important to connect with other people in that way and really validate that more emotional side of yourself. Because the more you do it, the less weird it becomes. And then the Pisces moon. So the thing with having a Pisces moon is that you pick up on so much that can't necessarily be understood or proven or validated by external sources. But that doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. And a huge part of you knows that. But to be a Pisces moon in a world that so strongly prioritizes the tangible, the logical side of things, this is a natural attunement to what is unseen, and also to like picking up on all sorts of things that you might never be able to understand. But that doesn't mean it's not real. And that doesn't mean it's not useful and it's not important. There are all sorts of ways to channel these emotions though. And I mean, sometimes they can't even be pinned down or categorized or even explained. But those emotions, the confusing ones, those can be the most important to sit with and to validate, because it's such a weird feeling, the feeling of knowing and feeling something so strongly, but it's not something that's clear. And in that way, it can be hard to even recognize what it is. But the point is that you don't have to make sense of it to honor the emotion, to allow it to be, to feel it, to recognize it, just for whatever it is in the moment. It doesn't have to make sense. You are experiencing life in a way that is seeing things beyond like the normal human eye. You feel primarily overseeing. You don't need to know something technically to know something. So having a Pisces moon is an incredible gift. This is deep intuition. This is deep connection and empathy and an ability to like do so many things that the world doesn't necessarily praise or give a lot of attention to. But you do need to recognize these parts of yourself and give them attention even if nobody else does. Because especially if you're able to express them or channel them into something that others can see, it's going to be deeply meaningful. Your emotions come from a deep place. So your expression of those emotions, they can touch parts of people that they don't even know that they have. They might not even know why, but it doesn't have to make sense. We don't have to understand it. This is a feeling connection. It's something that you can sense beyond the need for words. And that's something important. That's something to treasure and to really take care of. So this is what my moon video has become. I wasn't sure exactly where it would go, but this is my thoughts on the moon and of these various moon signs and just little things that I wanted to tell you about them. So I guess I'm gonna leave it there, here, and please feel free to let me know what is your moon sign, house, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Anything really. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you and I love you. Bye.